Hey, Larry Vickers here. Welcome to the Larry Vickers podcast, brought to you by Firearms Trainers Association. Some great folks. Today we're going to talk about some Glocks. Now, I could do a whole series of podcasts on the Glock. What I've touched on here, what I've got here is some guns out of our buddy Kyle Sweet's collection. And we're going to talk about Vickers Elite models, G17, G19, and also, in my opinion, the single best Glock they make, which is the G45. More or less kind of the commander version of the Glock. We're going to talk about that gun. These are actually some Vickers Elite models from Wilson from a little bit back a little ways, because there's a couple accessories that we've since brought to the market before Kyle got these pistols, such as our ambidextrous slide release and our trigger, which are now standard on the Vickers Elite models from Wilson Combat. So I'm going to take you through them, and what I'm really going to do here is maybe give you some information that if you're a serious Glock guy, you might know, but if you're just getting into the Glock, you may not be really aware of. All right, I'm just going to take you through some of those pointers and then talk about some of the accessories that I brought to the table with Tango Down and Wilson Combat. So here, let's dive right in. Let's take the 19 first. Now, first off, this is one of the Gen 5 G19s that did not have the front grasping grooves, and Wilson Combat had to do it after the fact, unlike the G45 where it comes from the factory. And you can see it because when Wilson did it on this side, they went ahead and machined in the grasping grooves to work around the original factory logo. On this side, it looks pretty much like factory. Okay, so bottom line is many custom Glock manufacturers or Glock makers have been doing this for a number of years, such as my good buddy Ben down at Boresight Solutions. So this is nothing new. Wilson Combat did some nice serrations on top. They do fine line serrations on their typical Glock builds. I had them do a little bit coarser serration, which I really like. Now, comes standard with a fiber optic front. There's a variety of front sights available for the Glock. You got gold beads, you got tritium, you got HD styles. The fiber optic is a good place to start, and then you can kind of venture off wherever you want to go. It makes sense for you to learn how to swap out your front sight. So if you want to try something different, like one of the HD sights, like from Ameriglo or Trijicon, which I highly recommend, you can swap them out. There's a little nut that threads into the bottom of the sight underneath. You may need to make sure you use really high strength Loctite when you put that on. You either red or green. You want to stay away from blue. Blue Loctite isn't real high strength stuff. It's stuff that you can still move, that's not really locked into place, and it's not appropriate for a front sight. Here's another thing you need to be aware of. The way the front sight fits in the cut inside the slide, it's real easy when you tighten it down with that little nut. It's real easy for the front sight to get canted. You won't realize it in some cases till you bring the pistol up and you get your sight picture and you're like, that doesn't quite look right. And then you look at it and you realize the front sight's canted. So what you need to do is cinch it down and then make sure it's straight, and either take a pair of pliers so you don't mar the finish, so be careful, or even put it in a vise or something to square that front sight back up. Now, let's talk about the rear sight. This is the Vickers sight that I did with Wilson Combat, and the inspiration of this sight was the 1911 battle sight that Wilson does, which I liked from the start. It was kind of their modification of some other sights on the market. I liked the sight right from day one when I saw it on their 1911s, and I went to Wilson's and I said, look, I've kind of got a name established in the Glock world. You guys are kind of new to it. You had some accessories, but you weren't really making headway in the Glock market. How about we collaborate on a sight? We can put my name on it. I'll help design it with you guys, and it'd be an adaptation of the battle sight. And then and I've been wanting to do a sight for a while, and they were like, absolutely. So we did the Glock sight, huge success. It's now migrated to other platforms such as the M&P and the HK series. A couple things about it. You got 2 set screws here, all right? When you get them now, it's common for the dovetail on this rear sight to be real snug. So you can tap it in and it fits in place, no problem at all. You're going to need to take the set screws and cinch them down. It wouldn't hurt to put a little bit of Loctite on them. Another thing that I'll oftentimes do that gets you around having to use Loctite is I'll dimple the threads just a little bit. I'll put them on a vise, hit them with a hammer just a little bit, and kind of mushroom out the threads just a bit, not much. And then that way, when you thread them back into the sight, they really kind of thread in tightly, and it kind of bypasses your need for Loctite. You want to lock them in place. It's not uncommon for them if you don't cinch them down. After a while, they'll back out and they'll be gone. Generally, the sight doesn't come loose because it's snug in the dovetail, but nevertheless, it's a good idea to cinch those down because you really don't want to lose the set screws. Now, one of the things I like about this sight is it has the U-notch, and we'll see if you guys can see that there. I'm not sure if you can see it or not, but it has a U-notch. I'm a fan of the U-notch. Kind of goes back to the Walther P38 design. And Wilson has it in their original battle sight, and we retain the U-notch in the majority of the Vickers sights. Now, I've got some friends of mine, like my buddy Ray up in Philly. He likes the square notch, so he gets the battle sight or the Vickers sight with a square notch, and that is available. One of the reasons I like a U-notch is your eye picks up on misalignment, horizontal misalignment of the front sight better with a U-notch versus a square notch. When it's biased to one side or another, the way the U appears, you can pick it up much easier. That's why I like a U-notch rear sight. And the way Wilson does it, they do a fantastic job. Also a recessed cut here, so the front sight is always essentially in a shadow. One of the things about these angled rear sights here that are serrated or whatnot, if you have light coming behind you, you can get glare off of it. If you have a little bit of a pocket cut, it keeps that rear notch in a shadow. So overall, real good sight, real happy with it. Now be aware of something, I brought this up before. Most people are going to have their rear sight biased one side or the other. All right, and I'll tell you why that is. Okay, now, you have a pivoting trigger, right? Hinge trigger, pivoting trigger. You also have a round face of the trigger. And here's the key part. The grip frame angle is a little bit sharper than it is on a 1911. And that all comes together, so when you pull the trigger and you fire the shot, it is real common for you to pull shots just slightly to the left as a right-hander and then slightly to the right as a left-hander. Very common. And it's just a byproduct of a variety of features. The number one thing, the X factor, is the grip frame angle in terms of how it puts your hand, and when you pull the trigger, you kind of go in that direction. And that's very common. Now, one way you can get around it is you can put more of your finger in like this. And when you pull the trigger, it kind of compensates for it. It allows you to almost pull the trigger a little bit in that direction or hook it, and that kind of compensates for you pulling it to the side. The problem is that's hand size dependent. All right. If you have small or medium sized hands, it's not really practical for you to hook your finger in. It's something for bigger hands. The other thing is that's not really desirable with other handguns. I don't know that I would recommend that with a 1911 or a Beretta or a SIG or an HK. So it's almost like a Glock only technique. And if that's all you do, shoot is Glocks, and you have big hands, by all means have at it. But with those other pistols, it's not really a great idea to hook your finger in like that and pull it to the side. With a lot of other guns, now you're going to pull the shot the other direction. So it's real common, myself included, to have that rear sight bias just a little bit off to the side. And that allows you to center up your shots downrange. How can you tell if that's the case? Well, you shoot a group, say at 10 yards or whatever, and you can cover it with your fist on end, and it's a little bit off to the side of your aiming point, or like the X-ring on a bullseye. It's real simple. You need to drift the rear sight over. You're doing your job because at 10 yards, you're able to put all your shots in a fist group turned on end. Your shots are a little bit to the left, drift your rear sight a little bit to the right. If it's the other way, as a left-hander, you drift the rear sight a little bit to the left. Real common. Now, if your group's bigger and you've got a group that you're covering with your hand at 10, you don't need to be drifting your rear sight. You need to work on the marksmanship fundamentals so you can shoot a group that you cover with your fist on end. All right? Okay, now, back plate. We now also, myself and Tango Down, we make a back plate that replaces this one that has kind of ears on it. And it's an optional thing. It doesn't come standard on the Vickers Elite model from Wilson. It's great on the smaller guns. G42, G43, it also works great on these, and it just gives you better purchase when you rack it, especially if you say an older person with arthritis in your hands or whatnot. You don't have quite the strength to rack it that you once did. You don't have real good grip. Your hands are wet. whatnot. It just, those little ears protrude out. We got the inspiration from the HKVP9. We liked the design and said, let's take this and apply it to the Glock series. So we have those available for different Glocks, and they work like a champ. Now, one of the things we specifically did on it is we didn't put any kind of logo on that rear sight plate that's available from Tango Down. We didn't put any kind of a logo on it. We left it plain. The reason being is I don't want anything back here that's going to draw attention when you bring the pistol up. I'm not a fan of any of the American flags or the Punisher logo or any kind of 2A logo or anything like that on there. Number one reason is if you have to use that gun in self-defense shooting, you don't want to have anything on there that, like a Punisher logo, that could come back to haunt you. Number two is when you bring the pistol up, subconsciously, the first thing you want to do is look at the American flag on the rear of the gun, and you go, no, I don't need to be looking at that. I need to be looking downrange at the front sight and or the bad guy. I don't need to be looking at the rear of the slide and looking at Old Glory. So I'm not a fan of any of this stuff back here, and actually when I see people in classes with it, I talk them through why I don't think it's such a good idea. All right, now moving on. This has the standard Gen 5 ambi slide release, which is actually perfectly functional. One of the things that myself and Tango Down did, we came out with one that's a bit enhanced, that has a little bit of a crescent shape on both sides, which allows it to be a little bit easier to release and easier to lock the slide to the rear. It's certainly easier than the stock one. This isn't terrible, but I would argue that our aftermarket piece that it's available through Tango Down, the ambi slide stop, is better than the factory standard. This does have our Gen 4 mag release. Now we make a magazine release, myself and Tango Down, for the Gen 3 and earlier guns. That was actually the first Vickers tactical Glock part that we ever brought to the market, was that mag release. And then the part, our portfolio grew from there. This is a Gen 4 one that is also compatible with the Gen 5s. All right, it's reversible. And we have a little bit of a rounded shape to it, a little bit of a beveled edge, and it gives you a little bit more purchase than the factory standard, which is not bad, but I would argue this one's a little bit better as well. Okay, moving on. Now, we have our grip plug here. Now, we made one for the Gen 3 and earlier guns that's a one piece, and it also has a rod on it that you can use as a disassembly tool, okay? The one on the Gen 4 and the Gen 5, we had to put our thinking cap on because of the back straps and how they attach into the gun. It kind of didn't work with our conventional wisdom on how to attach the one like on the Gen 3. So what we did was we did a male-female portion. There's a female portion that goes into the frame, and then you have this male portion that goes into it. And like I said, that's your disassembly tool. And what else it does, acts like a little bit of a mag bevel or a mag chute going in, very nice. And then the other thing it does, it closes up this back channel right here that goes all the way up to the trigger mechanism, goes up to the striker area and whatnot, which is not a good thing. I've seen it with Glocks on occasion where debris gets channelized down in and gets up in that trigger mechanism, and it can affect the ability of the gun to fire. Specifically, what I see is the trigger doesn't reset. You can pull the trigger. In many cases, it'll be very heavy. But with the sand and grit in there, now you can't reset the trigger. And I've seen that more than once. This grip plug, fills that gap. You don't have that issue. Also, it has a disassembly tool, and it features a little bit of a mag funnel or a mag chute, so it kind of has three purposes in one. This is a good piece of kit. One thing that I do on my Gen 5 or Gen 4 guns with this is I will take and go ahead and glue that female portion into the back of the frame. You don't have to worry about that on the Gen 3 or earlier guns because it's one piece that just clips in. The Gen 4, Gen 5 has two pieces, and I glue that one in to make it rock solid. Okay. In my opinion, the Gen 5 Glocks are the best Glocks they ever made. Big fan of them. I like the Gen 5 G45, my favorite. Gen 5 Glock 17 is great. Gen 5 Glock 19 is great. One of the things that Wilson did, they did a pretty cool laser stippling on it. Now there's custom stipple jobs available from a variety of people that look really good. Once again, Boresight Solutions is outstanding and has been doing it for many years, kind of the gold standard in the industry. Wilson's wanted something that was pretty repeatable, that didn't require a lot of handwork or skill work on guys having to sit there with a soldering iron and doing it. So they came up with this laser program and put my logo in the middle. Pretty slick, pretty nice. Doesn't maybe have quite the same texturing that a hand stippled one does, like from Boresight Solutions, but overall it's very uniform, very well done, and overall it gets the job done. Pretty slick approach. Now, of course, this is the standard Glock 19 magazine, holds 15 rounds. I recommend everybody put 14 rounds in it so you can seat the slide. You can seat the magazine in the gun with the slide forward. You have very little cushion in the magazine if you fill it all the way up and you try to push that top round down. It's difficult to seat with the slide forward. Okay, so when pistols like the Glock 19, in my opinion, are 14 round mags, they're not really 15. The Glock 17 is a 16 round mag, not really a 17 round mag. Also, both of these guns, the 17 and the 19, have my base plate on them, which was our first enhanced base plate, my first enhanced base plate with Tango Down. A little bit of a swell. It has a little bit of a scallop portion to the side here. Theory behind it is the magazine gets stuck in the gun and I have the ability to pry it out. Also, it works great for getting the magazine out of your mag pouch. So that little bit of additional purchase there allows you to get it out of the mag pouch really slick. Good piece of kit, real happy with it. As always, has my logo on the bottom and has little indentation so you can number the magazine from 1 up to 8. Okay, that's the G5, Gen 5 Glock 19 Wilson Combat Vickers Elite model. Kind of an older Gen one, like I said. Now we got some accessories now that come on standard on it that is not on this particular one, such as the ambi slide release and the trigger. Now we got the G17 one, really the same gun, except it's a full-size G17 style gun. Front grasping grooves, serrations on top, has, once again, a fiber optic front, has my rear sight, essentially the same gun, a little bit longer grip, of course. One of the things I like about the Gen 5s is you can make this back strap bigger if you want for larger hands, but I like the smaller hand feel. My opinion is, on a pistol, you're better off erring on a gun being a little bit too small for your hand than a gun being a little bit too big. And I like what Glock has done here, where they made the standard frame a little bit smaller with a little bit less reach to the trigger. And then if you want to make it bigger, you have the options to do that. Overall, great piece of kit. Now, let's go ahead and hit the G45. Big fan of the G45. It's kind of the Gen 5 version of the Glock 19X. The Glock 19X, more or less, was the U.S. Army submission that Glock submitted. The only real difference between it and what they are submitted to the Army is the G19X does not have a manual safety, where the Army submission did. All right, they brought out the G19X, slick gun, flat dark earth, had the ambi slide release, but did not have front grasping grooves. It kind of had a unique magwell type of situation with a step up front. It did not have a full Gen 5 magwell. Later on, a little while later on, they introduced a true Gen 5 version of the G19X in black. And this is it, G45. My opinion, the best Glock, the best version of the Glock handgun they ever made. Like I said, a commander size gun, more or less a Glock 19, or excuse me, Glock 17 size grip with a Glock 19 size top end on it. A really slick piece of kit. Front grasping grooves are standard. Of course, your standard sight set up like you see on Glocks. Standard Gen 5 controls, even has the magwell that you see on Gen 5s. Real slick piece of kit. Overall, they did a great job on it. Gen 5 magazine, which is reverse compatible with older Glocks. One of the cool things about it they've been doing with the Gen 5 mag is you have the high visibility follower. That's been available aftermarket for a while, but this is the first time Glock has really done it on a production mag. Why do I like that? Because it gets dropped on the ground or you see it on a bench or whatever, you can tell at a glance the magazine's empty. Whereas with a black follower or a follower of another color and whatnot, you can't always immediately identify that the mag's empty. With a high vis follower, you can. Now, this is a first for Glock, but other manufacturers have been doing it for a while, and I'm a big fan of it. People go, well, it's just going to get black anyway over time because it's going to get dirty and whatnot. And there's some truth in that. The reality of it is there's always going to be some orange that you're going to be able to see. So you should still be able to see if it's dropped on the ground or on a range or on a workbench or something. You should be able to see at least a little bit of orange no matter how dirty the mag is, and that tells you immediately that the magazine is empty. All right. Hey, let's touch a little bit on the history of Glock. Glock was brought to the table in Austria. Gaston Glock was the guy that brought it to fruition. It was some other people, of course. Nobody designed something like this by themselves. He was putting a tender in for the new Glock Austrian Army handgun in the early 1980s. And essentially the gun that ended up being adopted became the P80. That's the predecessor to the Glock 17 that we know today. Wasn't necessarily an instant hit. Started out, it was the first very popular polymer frame handgun. HK had the VP9 series and the VP9Z, VP9 being the machine pistol variant, the VP9Z being the pistol that was a semi-automatic variant of the machine pistol. And it was truly the first polymer frame handgun. But once again, it wasn't wildly successful either. Glock was the first gun that came to the market with a polymer frame that was wildly successful and was very popular. Very early on, a lot of hardcore guys were against it. It wasn't classic steel, it wasn't even aluminum, which a lot of guys weren't even a fan of aluminum back in the day, but it came in with a polymer frame. There's a lot of people against it. Over time, however, they gained traction, especially in law enforcement and other places, and one thing led to another and led to another, and now this is without a doubt the most popular handgun the world has ever seen. I estimate over 15 million have been made from when they started to this day. Without a doubt the most popular handgun the world's ever seen. I see classes, not only is it the most popular handgun in my classes, and it's been that way for many years now, but I've had classes, it's not uncommon for me to have 2 or 3 pistol classes a year where every single person is shooting a Glock. And I'm not talking about a police agency, I'm talking about an open enrollment class with civilians and law enforcement and military and a variety of people there, and everybody's shooting a Glock. That is not uncommon. It's almost always the dominant gun in my class. Only occasionally will some other gun outnumber it. In any given class that I teach, 12, 15, 20 people at almost any given location in the United States, at least half the class is going to be shooting a Glock. All right, generally now 9mm. 45 you still see on occasion. 40 has largely disappeared. You really never see civilians shooting 40 anymore. And the only time you see 40 is with law enforcement who still use it and have got a pile of ammo at their law enforcement agency. Almost always some flavor of a 9mm Glock. Very reliable, robust handgun. One of the things about it that's also a strength and a weakness, it's a gun that will work basically with almost no maintenance, almost like the AK of handguns. The problem is that people get in very lazy. You get guys that don't lube them, you get guys that don't clean them, and they just say it works, it's a Glock, no big deal. And then they take that mentality and mindset over the other guns like the 1911, the Beretta, the M16 or AR-15, M4 family. And then that's a recipe for disaster, because some of those guns, if you don't lube them and occasionally clean them, you can't treat them like Glocks, because if you do, it's just a matter of time before they choke. Now, how did I get in the parts and accessories business on this gun? It was real simple. Teaching guys back in the day with a Glock and struggling with the mag catch or struggling with the slide stop. And I remember saying, you know what, somebody ought to make this and somebody ought to make that and you ought to do this. And I thought, wait a minute, I'll make it. So I had good relationships with people in the industry. I've been friends with Jeff Cahill at Tango Down for a number of years. I reached out to Jeff and I said, hey, Jeff, why don't we partner up and make a slightly extended tactical mag catch for the Gen 3 Glock, which is also reverse compatible with the older ones, slightly extended tactical mag catch with rounded edges. Why don't we do that? And he said, hey, great idea. So we started going down that path. We went in on a mold together. One thing led to another. And now fast forward, and we got almost 30 SKUs or more, different colors involved. We got mag catches for those older Gen Glocks. We got mag catches for the newer ones. We got base plates. We got the cocker plate in the rear of the slide. We got ambi slide stops. We got tons of accessories, different colors. Been huge success. Huge success. And at the time, it's kind of interesting, Tango Down was really known as a manufacturer of accessories for the AR-15 M4 family. They still are, but now it's almost completely morphed them, and now they're primarily known as a manufacturer of handgun accessories and primarily for the Glock. So that has been a fantastic journey. It was one of those things that the stars aligned. I hooked up with Jeff at Tango Down, and we've never stopped, and we don't plan on stopping anytime soon. Been a big success, real happy with it. I'm a big fan of the Glock. I tell everybody needs to own a Glock 19. I tell people, whether it's your first gun or it's your 100th gun you've bought, you'll never regret owning a Glock 19. And in my opinion, the Gen 5 Glocks, whether it's the 17, 19, or the G45, this is the best Glocks they've ever made. Hey gang, I hope you learned something out of this. A little bit of an overview, a little bit of lessons learned and whatnot on the Glock using Wilson Combat Vickers Elite, Glock 17, Wilson Combat Vickers Elite, Glock 19, and a box stock G45. Notice they're all Gen 5 guns. They get my seal of approval. Check them out if you're in the market for a Glock. Have a good one. Stay safe. We'll see you right back here next time. LAV out.